Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mansi. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Nikita to kindly introduce Dr. Sumedha ma'am.
To introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Sumedha Rege. Dr. Sumedha is an ENT surgeon by profession and a writer by choice and passion. He would describe himself as a surgeon who would rather wield a pen. He currently runs his own private practice in Thane and has also previously worked as a postgraduate trainer in a popular institute in Mumbai. Her love for writing for the written word pushed her to pursue an advanced diploma in creative writing with a distinction in 2010. Since then, she has been actively contributing to various publications such as pratidip.com, Women's Web, and Ideating Imagine, along with, of course, the Checkup Magazine. Personally, I have got an opportunity to be mentored by her in her role as an executive editor with the Checkup Magazine, and have taken away so much from every interaction with her. Ma'am, we are really glad to have you here today to share your knowledge on writing with us. And the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Nikita. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Team Checkup for giving me this opportunity to talk about something which is very close to my heart. And that, of course, is writing. Kelly, if you could just go to the first slide, please.
Please give me a minute.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Ma'am, we can't hear you still. Your voice is a little soft.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think it's better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, fine. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As quoted by Aristotle, to write well, express yourself like the common people, but think like a wise man. So here we come to the basic of writing, in which you will be known, or in which anyone can get to know you only through what you write. Because there is a lot of difference between speech and writing, as we will find out in the next slide. So why do we write, or where has writing come from? I think a brief history into all the modes of communication that we know is kind of essential before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual topic. Communication, as we know, is absolutely essential for survival, not just for human beings, but you can see it across species, whether it is bird calls, or whether it is, animals making different sounds, or sometimes it even maybe like the wind rustling through the trees, so to speak. And that brings us to the earliest form of human communication, which was obviously oral and through signs. Oral communication has, especially in a country like India, oral communication has been given a lot of importance, because the initial literature which we know of, it was all passed down via oral, through the oral mode. Whether it was the Vedas, whether it was the Upanishads, it was all passed down orally. But the problem with oral communication is, one is everything has to be committed to memory, and we cannot definitely say how much that is going to last. Another thing is, whenever there is oral communication, one thing that someone can do is kind of interpret it in their own way, or maybe what else we can, sometimes what happens is, if a slight nuance is changed here and there, with a lot of change going on and on and on, the entire meaning or the entire meaning of whatever you're trying to convey can sometimes get changed. I'm sure everyone has played like the game of Chinese whispers as kids, but when we see that someone has started to say something, it comes out as a totally garbled version. So that is why it was later on, for the preservation of ideas, what was developed was pictography, and then ultimately it came out as writing, which was used as a mode of preserving thoughts and ideas for posterity. It could be something very simple, like what you are thinking now, or it could be something like a, if you take an example of the great Kalidas who wrote the Meghdut, it was actually his interpretation of what the monsoon feels like, which we are still able to read so many centuries later. Next, please. So why do we write? We write to keep a record of different things, like I gave an example for logic and clarity. That's another thing. Sometimes, because nowadays one popular idea which has come up and which I also find quite interesting is some making of something which we call mind maps. And the making of mind maps, when you have a lot of thoughts jumbled together, you must have observed it even in, like, even though I'm addressing the healthcare fraternity, even in across your fields, you must have seen that if there is like a difficult diagnosis which you're trying to pinpoint, or even if it is a complicated surgery, once you sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, and then afterwards, when you start putting your thoughts together, you see that one thing leads to another, and you get a clarity, a different kind of clarity to it, instead of just like keeping it in your mind and then it may be lost in a split second. The same thing that naturally follows, that following logic and clarity, what you come up with is workable plans. Of course, and another thing is, like I said, to keep a record, and that is to revisit thoughts, feelings, and ideas. Sometimes you might have some brilliant idea, in the middle of the night, but you just cannot go and like tell everyone about it. That is one thing. So what you do is you like kind of put it down in writing and then you revisit it. Then again, of course, to take things to a slightly lighter side, what I'd like to say is, next morning when you wake up, you realize that maybe, oh, okay, I'm glad I didn't tell that to different people. It was not so brilliant after all. Another thing is for better and clear communication, and that is why, whenever we still do something like we have important documents or we have some agreement to sign, the first thing is, are you ready to give it in writing? Because once you commit your pen to paper, it is something which that way cannot be erased. You can say that writing actually started off as the original footprint. Like now we say that we have digital footprints which cannot be erased. The writing started off as the original footprint, which you can say. Next, please. Uh, Now, as uh, since we belong to the healthcare fraternity, all of us have had lots and lots of screeds to write. I mean, when you start off with Gray's Anatomy, the sheer volume of all that you have to write and reproduce, that itself is going to, like, if you put it in Hindi terms, अच्छे अच्छों की हवा निकल जाती है. That's what it is. So we are used to writing our exam papers, and we are used to writing like medical reports. Once you go into residency, you are used to writing case sheets, operation records, so on and so forth. But all that is more of a factual, in which like there is something, a set of instructions or something is given to you, you commit it to paper. Nowadays, of course, you commit it to your laptop, but that is the way of putting it in writing. This brings us to one more thing that is called as creative writing. Now, creative writing again is it. It actually measures what is your take on any situation or idea or thought which has been put to you, and that is why I have taken the liberty of kind of slightly, what you can say, classifying it. This is not an official classification which you will find anywhere, but I have just put it for the sake of a working concept. The first thing you can differentiate creative writing into is based on intent, where it becomes again of two types. That is personal, that is journaling, or keeping a diary. You can keep a diary of anything. I mean, it can be interesting quotes which you read at the back of a truck, which people like to note down. That is one thing. It can be innovative and new kind of like words, or it can be recipes. It can be anything. That is what we call as personal writing or journaling, which is only like literally for your eyes only, or maybe it may be for someone who's like very few people, a very small circle. The best example of this kind of personal journaling actually getting into the wide world is one interesting book. I'm sure everyone must have heard of it. It's called The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. That is when she and her family were hiding. She was not very old, she was a teenager. When she and her family were hiding during the Holocaust, when they were hiding from the Nazis, that time the entire episode of her incarceration, so to speak. Ultimately, the story had a bit of a tragic ending. Of course, she was captured and then taken away to a concentration camp where she died. But the thing what was preserved is her diary with her thoughts as to, and that gave people a glimpse into what it was actually like to hide in a small attic and with so 3 4 people, because there were two families who were hiding there, and what she wanted as a young girl, as a teenager, what were her dreams and hopes, and what terror actually, if you read that thing, you can actually know what terror is, because when you hear the trump of boots coming in at the front door every time, it's like your heart is in. So this is one example of a personal journal or a personal diary going in today's speak. You can say it is something like it has gone viral and it has become very famous. That is one. That is exclusively for your eyes only. The second one, which is there, is public writing for the public. That may be vocational. That is when your creative writing is your profession, and that can include anything, because nowadays you see a lot of content driven stuff. You have online magazines, of course, the Checkup, I'm sure it's a very good example. That is one. Then you have other magazines, like some may be bent, political bent, or even nowadays, more of print media is actually trying to get into online media, so the reading can be accessible to everybody at any time. So you have people who are writing for these, you have people who are writing like maybe songs or jingles for ads, you have people who are writing small blurbs, people who are writing even billboard advertisements. And yeah, of course, people who are like even in the medical profession, you must have seen that there are so many people who are writing like something to do pamphlets for pharma, or maybe some research you're publishing. All that is, especially if you're into the entire core of medical writing, that's what you're doing. You're writing you're using writing as a vocation, as a profession. Even actually some famous novels and things, series of novels which come out, especially if anyone has read the Milton Boone series, they actually have professional writers who sit down, develop plots and write it down. It is purely writing as to what the mandate, what the boss says, that you write. That is vocation. The second one, of course, is a vocation, where you use creative writing as a hobby. So you can say that you are trying to get the best of both worlds, so to speak. That you are keeping your hobby alive, and at the same time, you are doing something creative, but you have a different profession. So you are like more of a apni marzi ke raja, so to put. You can write whatever you like and hope that people read. And of course, based on form, we have fiction and non-fictional writing. Fictional writing, we see again, it can further be divided into two types. That is, you have the more of a prose form and a poetry form. Poetry, of course, can be based on truth, but then again, it carries more of the author's ideas in it. That's why I say it's fiction. But prose, if you see, it can be in the form of novellas or short stories. Next, please. Then you come to something which is called as the writer's paradox. This is true for avocational writers, people who write for themselves but want to be read by others. That is, they want the best of both worlds. It is actually, you can say, something like the golden middle of the writer spectrum. But again, like, it is very easy to be at either one end or the other end. To maintain balance is difficult. And that is why this state is kind of difficult to this. The first thing that you always have to remember is way out. If you have to attain this golden middle, you should never be disheartened. That whatever may be your piece, you feel this is very close to my heart, so on and so forth. You put it across to 15 other people. 2 may like it, 13 may reject it. That's okay. And that is what is essential. Writing in your style, but crafting it to suit the readers. Writing in your style, it means that you are conveying your message, your take on a particular situation. It may be pro, against, it may be anything. It is your ideas, but you have to make sure you have to craft it or put your ideas in such a way that it has to be appealing to someone who is going to read it, to the audience. And here, that is why I recently read a very interesting book which is called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. It is a non-fiction book, but apparently it has sold very well, much better than some fiction books. And I would like to read out a very small passage from it because that will give you a small glimpse into the world of the vocational and the avocational writers. So here we go. The transaction. A school in Connecticut once held, because this author is from the US, a school in Connecticut once held a day devoted to the arts. And I was asked if I would come and talk about writing as a vocation. When I arrived, I found that a second speaker had been invited. Dr. Brock, I'll call him, a surgeon who had recently begun to write and sold some stories to magazines. He was going to talk about writing as an avocation. That made us a panel, and we sat down to face a crowd of students and teachers and parents, all eager to learn the secrets of our glamour work. Dr. Brock was dressed in a bright red jacket, looking vaguely bohemian as authors are supposed to look. And the first question went to him. What was it like to be a writer? He said it was tremendous fun. Coming home from an arduous day at the hospital, he would go straight to his yellow pad and write his tensions away. The words just flowed. It was easy. I then said that writing wasn't easy and wasn't fun. It was hard and lonely, and the words seldom just flowed. Next, Dr. Brock was asked if it was important to rewrite. Absolutely not, he said. Let it all hang out, he told us. And whatever form the sentence take will reflect the writer at his most natural. I then said that rewriting is the essence of writing. I pointed out that professional writers rewrite their sentences over and over and over and then rewrite what they have rewritten. What do you do on days when it isn't going well? Dr. Brock was asked. He said he just stopped writing and put the work aside for a day when it would go better. I then said that the professional writer must establish a daily schedule and stick to it. I said that writing is a craft, not an art, and that the man who runs away from his craft because he lacks inspiration is fooling himself. He is also going broke. What if you're feeling depressed or unhappy? A student asked. Won't that affect your writing? Probably it will, Dr. Brock shrugged. Go fishing, take a walk. Probably it won't, I said. If your job is to write every day, you will learn to do it like any other job. A student asked if we found it useful to circulate in the literary world. Dr. Brock said he was greatly enjoying his new life as a man of letters, and he told several stories to be taken to lunch by his publisher and his agent at Manhattan restaurants where writers and editors gather. I said that professional writers are solitary drudges who seldom see even other writers. Do you put symbolism in your writing? A student asked me. Not if I can help it, I replied. I have an unbroken record of missing the deeper meaning in any story, play, movie, and as far as dance and mime, I have never had any idea of what is being conveyed. I love symbols, Dr. Brock exclaimed, and he described with gusto the joys of weaving them through his work. And so the morning went, and it was a revelation to us all. At the end, Dr. Brock told me he was enormously interested in my answers. It had never occurred to him that writing could be hard. I said to him I was just as interested in his answers. It had never occurred to me that writing could be easy. Maybe I should take up surgery on the side. So there you are. You see the two ends of the spectrum and what we are trying to achieve, the golden middle. Next, please. Yes. That brings us to that elusive person whom we call the audience or the reader here. Okay, there is a slight difference between the audience and the reader, of course, because if you're performing to a play or you're telling a story or something, people are, for one, they can, forget the play, but if you're telling a story, someone can ask you the deeper meaning right there. Your facial expressions, the way you modulate your speech can convey a lot of the deeper meaning. But then again, in case of writing, like I pointed out at the beginning itself, it is only what you put into your words that will be conveyed. So you have to make sure that you absolutely put into writing only what you mean, which is the last point in this. That is, decide whom you're writing for. That is the first thing. If you're writing a very, very, let's say, like since we are all drawn from the medical fraternity. If there are two aspects to this, if you're writing a research paper and you're sending it to any MJ or something like that, you will write in a different style altogether. But at the same time, if you are supposed to, like, some magazine approaches you and says like we need some help to like educate women about anemia or something like that, we bring about a totally different picture of the same situation. So that is how it goes. To decide whom you are writing for and how, what is the level to which they can pick up what you are trying to say. There's no point in like writing down the entire treatise of like, if I say something about the inner ear for a child who's in fourth standard, he's never going to understand. That's one thing. The second point is never condescend to your audience. Never condescend in the sense you have to bring yourself to their level and write like that. Don't ever try to, because that way, the readers, they're quite smart. They know that, if you put it into words saying that perhaps you will not understand this or you may not get the point, I will make it simple. If you put that one simple sentence into your writing, it changes the whole meaning. And nowadays, readers, like, trust me, they have become very, very, very conscious. But don't pander to them either. This, I would put it more in specific terms of like sometimes when you're writing something like an opinion piece or something, and it has come out as a very strong piece for something which you feel very strongly for. You go with it. It is your piece. You put it like that. Afterwards, don't have second thoughts like maybe I should have changed it. Maybe I should have done something. No. If it is an opinion piece, it is your thoughts. You have to write for yourself and try to make the reader understand what you are trying to say. There's no point in pandering with. Remember that your words are the product and should offer a glimpse of you. And of course, like I said initially, never put into writing what you would not say in conversation. Next, please. Then we come to crafting the art. Good writers, it is said, may be born, but great writers are always made. All of us tend to think that anything that is got to do with something like creativity is like either it's a blessing from above. That's what we think. Anyone who can draw well, we say, oh yeah, yeah, he is an excellent or she is an excellent artist. And if someone is a singer, we are like, it's like we keep on saying, oh, what a voice. But what we fail to see is that there is a lot of hard work which actually comes, which is put into the end product. So, so that is what it is. That good writers may be born, but great writers are always made. Good writers in the sense that some people have got more of an imagination, some people have got a freer flow of ideas, some people have got more clarity of thought, so to speak. Some people have got a prodigious memory which will help them remember like n number of words, where you and I know like 5 adjectives. Someone who's a great writer will know like 50 adjectives for that same noun. It's something like that. But what everyone has to do is keep on and on and on honing the craft. Your first piece will never come out like as great as you wanted it to, maybe. And maybe 6 months later, when you go and revisit the piece, you will find it so awful that you will say, no, 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 I didn't write that. You will shrug off the responsibility of writing it. So this is what it is. Just like, we today when we hear a recording by Lata Mangeshkar or somebody like that, we are like transported to a different world. We say, what a voice. But we always have to remember that it was also the effort of the amount of practice that she put in it, that the number of language teachers she hired to just get the diction right. So that is what we have to keep on doing. Some prerequisites for good writers is observation of the world around you, but that is true even if you're a good painter or anything. You have to have more of an interest in people. If you want your things, if you want your writing to come out well, because ultimately what resonates with all human beings across all nationalities, languages, whatever it may be, is stories. What resonates with human beings is stories. If you're able to bring in the human angle into everything, and that is where observation of the world comes, then you have got half the stuff done. Of course, the next half of it, of course, is the clear logical flow of thoughts. Because you cannot be like all over the place. If you are like trying to, here I'm diverging slightly into fiction, so to speak. If you're trying to, or even if you're trying to narrate a small incident which took place at a traffic signal while you were waiting for the light to change. If you're describing the scene in the street, you have to keep it at that. You cannot like start describing that I was waiting at the traffic signal and then I had woken up late that morning and then I was in a rush. No, you can start off with the first sentence that I woke up late and I was in a rush and then I was unhappy because the traffic signal was late. So that is how the clear logical flow of thoughts has to be. The next, of course, which I have mentioned even before, is of course patience and perseverance. Like I said, 6 months later, the first pieces which you wrote, you may fail to claim responsibility of those, but you need to persevere because ultimately it's like, if to put it, because again, like I said in the book which I read, the author William Zinsser has come up with the example of carpentry, comparing it to writing. So he has said that, yeah, the first chair which you make might be a little wobbly, but at least it is looking like a chair. So after that, you make it very steady and nice. After that, you start with the embellishment. So patience and perseverance. That just because you're not able to do justice to it today, if you keep on and on and on with the writing, you will be able to do justice to it at some point of time. And the last, of course, is I put it in here is innovation. Innovation is the ability to bring something new to what you are trying to say. There are the recent thing, the current thing which is going on in the news is of course the war between Israel and Hamas. And you must have seen that it has been put in 15 different ways in 15 different newspapers. But one of those will be one which you can relate to. Maybe it is because they have put it in a different way. They have started with something like the Old Testament or something like that and come to current times. That is what innovation in writing is about. Next, please. Then you have to find your niche. What do you think you will be able to, write better? It's just the same. Like if you compare it with singing, you'll see that some people are like more interested in classical singing. Some are like the light Sugam Sangeet kind of people. Some are into bhajans. Some are into tumris. Goes and on and on. Same way it is. You have to find your niche and write. The easiest way to do it, I always think, is to just take a look at your own bookshelf. You will see that inadvertently, if you're a reader, over the years, you will have gathered something which is very dear to your heart. It may be like kind of self-help books, it may be kind of non-fiction, it may be autobiographies, or it just may be chicklit also for all you know. Because what you like to read always influences what you write. And that brings us to the next point, that don't hesitate, just get on with it. That is the beauty of any form of creativity. And I always try to like whittle it down to our own experience and practice also. Just because you finished your graduation and post graduation doesn't mean that you have become a great doctor. You have to put yourself out there and you have to, that's why we call it practice. We just have to like looking at some senior person, you say, Arey, wo to kya hai baba? That is true. He or she is a great person. I'm not denying that. But it is because they put themselves out on the limb and went on and on and on and on with the practice. Same thing goes for writing also. And another thing which is here is try out different genres till you find your happy space where you find your creative juices flowing the best. It may be, you try your hand at article writing, not well, you didn't like it yourself. I mean, you're not very happy. That's fine. You can go ahead and try poetry next. That's not an issue at all. So you keep on trying out because, and this is another thing, trying out different genres, which has been advised as treatment for writer's block also. That people who are like, even who are professional writers, after a time, like any job, ultimately it gets stale. So you need to infuse it with some new life. They are told to like, they can be, even I've heard that they do it even in print media, that someone who's like, they won't publish the byline, someone who's doing like, let's say all the time covering investigative. After that, sometimes they just might move him to investigate a resort and find out what it is like to get a traveler. So that kind of thing. Just try out different genres till you find your happy space and try changing the happy space to keep from going stale and getting repetitive. Next, please. That brings us to the free tax pyramid. Now, free tax pyramid, again, yeah, you're wondering what kind of a graph and, this kind of thing is doing in writing, which looks something more like out of a medical journal than anything. Free tax pyramid is a graphic depiction of the sequence of writing events. And even though this is mainly used for fictional writing, and today, yeah, that was the one point which I should have made at the beginning. I beg your pardon for that. That is that today we are going to touch mainly upon non-fictional writing. Fictional writing is something which is a totally different genre, and I think since most of the people who have joined the webinar today are like readers of the checkup. So I think it would be better if we like keep our scope limited to articles. Again, in articles, I'll be touching on three other things which you will see as we go on. And but fictional writing, we'll just keep it at bay for the moment. But Freytag's pyramid, I personally think, holds true for both non-fiction as well as fiction. It, of course, the best singular example which has been quoted for this Freytag's pyramid is the Ramayana, in which you see, if you see the graph, it is like it shows that um, you see that initially there is the stage has been set for one type of event, one sequence of events which are going on. After that, there is some sort of inciting incident, and there is a rising action. After that, you have a climax, there's a falling action, a resolution. But the thing is, it never goes back to normal. The reason is that whatever is the inciting, like if we see in the Ramayana, the inciting incident obviously was Ram's exile from Ayodhya. The climax was when, and rising action is when Sita is kidnapped. Climax is the killing of Ravan. Resolution, falling denouement is when he's coming back to Ayodhya, and then afterwards he starts to rule. The old rule is gone. The same way, we can use this in terms of an article. The first setting the stage is giving the reader a glimpse of your idea. Then what made you write about this particular thing? And let's say, like, if I take a very small example, like, let's say, what are we doing? There are rising cases of deafness. And what are we going to do about it? So why are you writing about this? That is the first thing. It may be that because noise pollution has increased a lot. So then rising action is how many cases you have seen, what has happened, what do you think is the reason for this, and what ultimately will happen if these things are not curbed. And then you come down to what are your ideas on curbing this menace of noise pollution. Ultimately, you go to a new normal in which you hope that everyone looks after their ears and everyone stays healthy and happy. So this way you can use it for you can use it across spectra, that is for fiction as well as non-fiction. Next, please. Then you come to the bare basics of writing. What are the things what you should do when you sit down with your, nowadays I'll say when you sit down with your laptop. I was about to say pen and paper, but that's a different thing. Decide, first thing what you have to decide is what you want to say and how much. If I give the same topic, I mean, people have, like, if you've seen it in school, the teacher gives out one common topic for an essay, but 15 children have got 15 different takes. So that is the first thing that you have to decide what you want to say and how much. How much is very important, and especially now, in today's world, because so to speak that we actually as writers have to compete a lot for the reader's attention. The reader has got very limited attention to give us. There are lots of distractions, be it in the form of, and anything which has got visual appeal, because what you are trying to do as a writer is appeal to the reader's imagination. If you have left nothing to imagination in the form of a video, then obviously that is the one thing that visual media, that's one thing which you have to compete with. You have to compete with 15 different things from the reader's life. It may be a bawling kid, it may be what is going to be cooked for dinner, it may be his job, his commute, whatever else it is. So that is why you have to deciding how much to say. And that is why I still maintain it, even though I have not been able to come to that level myself, that if you are putting something, especially into digital media, you have to try and keep it within 1000 words. 900 words would be ideal. Within 1000 words, if you're able to convey your idea to the reader, it will be a good. I'd heard this in a very interesting conference for the Orange Flower Awards one, in which the editor of a famous paper, he was saying that nowadays people tend to read with phones in vertical mode. So if your piece is that interesting that they're able to come from vertical mode to horizontal mode, you should know that you have achieved a lot. Yeah. So you should know you have to have a proper layout as to what you want to say and how much of it to say. The next is voice. In what voice you are going to address your reader. And again, like I said, that since human beings are mostly about stories, of course, if it is a long and factual article about the causes of something and the resolution of something, then okay, what you think carries no importance. But if you, even if you're trying to write like an opinion piece or something like a travel log, or even sometimes, even in short scientific pieces, you can do it. First person voice, that why I was drawn to it or what I think of this, that normally resonates because it is giving that reader, most of us that if you go to see, that slight amount of voyeurism is embedded in the human gene. So everyone likes to get a glimpse into what someone else is thinking. That's why mind readers are so important. And that is why first person voice resonates best. Then you come to style. You have to develop your own style as you go. Keep it original. Do not try to, no matter like how much of a fan you are of, I don't know, Amish Tripathi or maybe William Shakespeare or maybe Arthur Conan Doyle. Keep it original. Do not go into their style of writing. Your style of writing has to be your own. Like again, I said, without seeming condescending, keep it simple. Keep it clear. This is the main thing. Clarity, clarity, and clarity. Again, when we go to the next this, you will see that clarity is the most important. And cut unnecessary clutter. Like I know I quoted the example that people who have like prodigious memories, who make good writers, know like 50 adjectives for one noun. That doesn't mean that you have to use all 50 at one go. Keep your idea lucid. Like when I read out that passage from the transaction from On Writing Well, if you look at his sentences, they are very brief. There's nothing very long and involved and complicated which like makes it difficult to understand. See, because if you look at the sentences, it's like when Dr. Brock was asked what it would be like to be a writer, he said it was tremendous fun. He said that it was the best thing which had happened to him and it was tremendous fun and it raised his life to dizzying heights somewhere, all it was tremendous fun. He liked it. That is the gist of it. All the other things which come in are embellishments. And too many embellishments, it's like, trying to have a cake and then you cut into it and you see that it's all buttercream and there's no cake in it. So that is what you don't want. Cut the unnecessary clutter, keep it clear and simple. Next, please. Can I have the... So in the beginning, this is the most important part because, half the things which readers read, they are made or marred at this point. That is in the beginning. You have to capture your audience. For capturing your audience, you have to have, of course, a catchy title, a crisp beginning which hooks the imagination. You hint at what is coming to keep the reader reading and try an unusual beginning if you can carry it off. Catchy title here, I would like the last time also I quoted this example from the Checkup, that in that I think one person who writes for the Checkup, he has written about his teacher, and that he has given it the title which he has given to it is To Serve with Love. It is of course the title of another famous book, but still, yeah, it is by Dr. Parmeshwaran Sankar for the TCU. He has written To Serve with Love, and he has given a small gist about how his teacher won an award and what he thinks it is like to be a student of such a great man. But when you see that title, you realize that this is a human experience, and that is what you're drawn to. Another example is like, even though it is fictional, it's of course Margaret Mitchell's great Civil War novel, Gone with the Wind. If she would have just kind of titled it like Scarlett, and the heroine of the novel is called Scarlett O'Hara. So if it would be called like Scarlett and the Civil War, okay, it has got a rhyme to it, but it would be a bit of a May title. Because with Gone with the Wind, she is trying to convey something which has actually disappeared from American living. That is the way of living that they had in the southern states of America, of course, and slavery. I mean, it was all built on slavery. That we are not here to discuss the pros and cons of that, but Gone with the Wind is how an entire lifestyle changed within the short span of 5-10 years for an entire generation. So that is what she's trying to convey, and that is why we have this. So begin with a catchy title and a crisp beginning, that is, which hooks the imagination of the reader. Crisp beginning is in the sense that, instead of like, even if you're writing a very factual article, but if you begin with something which totally gives a hint of, that if you say that there is a boom everywhere, but a boom is not good for your ears. Yeah, that is something which ultimately hints at the idea that, yeah, this writer is going to get into like the nitty-gritties of hearing and write down maybe about 15 different types of hearing. But if instead of saying that, yeah, nowadays noise pollution is very common and it has affected human hearing, if you are not trying to put your reader to sleep here, yeah, that is another of your most important competitors. Always remember that. That if you see a person who's dozing with a book on his lap, know that it is the writer's fault, not that reader. He has fallen asleep. Most of the times it's because he has fallen asleep out of sheer boredom. So keep the beginning crisp. Hint at what is coming. That is, of course, if you say that the boom in your ears is not good, then you know that the person is maybe going to write something about different conditions of the ear. If you can try an unusual beginning, so you can try an unusual beginning, you can carry it off. Only if you can carry it off. Like, for example, if you were to write, like, just as I quoted for a trending piece on Israel and the Gaza Strip, what's going on. If you say that, like, if you come up with a different thing which says that Moses did not know that maybe he would have to migrate to Egypt again. So, yeah, it is related to Hamas, it is related to Israel, it is related to the entire thing, the entire scenario which is going. But it's a different way of putting. So, try an unusual beginning only if you can carry it off. Next, please. Then you come to the middle. The middle of this is very important because this is what it is. First 2-3 paragraphs ho gaya, everything is crisp, filled with quotes, maybe filled with cliches, maybe filled with 20 different adjectives and adverbs. Then you come to actual development of the idea, and that is very important. Because what happens that most of the times there is a beginner's bravado in which you are like very happy and you have written 15 different things, and then suddenly you find that that you have got nothing to go on with. That is why it is always a good idea to have all your ducks in a row, so to speak, that to know that, okay, now that I have written about this condition, or let's say, since I was taking the example of hearing, since now I have described that why noise pollution causes problems, then I come to the next thought, that which people are more prone to this, where they can be exposed to this, and what can be done about this. So these are the way in which the thoughts have to go, and I have to give like a paragraph each to, or maybe 2 paragraphs to the first and then a paragraph each to the next. I just cannot keep on saying that, no, horns also honk and crackers also burst and industrial things also whir. People know that, but they just want to know that what it is to have it actually booming in your head. So that is what you need to do that. So keep it from turning into an expanding waistline. Stay away from the filler and the clutter trap. Clutter, as you know, is clutter of too many words, too many sentences on the same idea, of course. If you're writing sentences on different ideas, I'm not saying that. If you're writing too many sentences, so that is why, later when we go to the next slide, I'll tell you why editing is important. And sometimes you have fillers. Fillers actually more than non-fiction, they are commoner in novels and fiction. That sometimes you decide, yeah, that I want to write, like people come up with this grand idea, oh, I want to write 50,000 words. Then afterwards, when they have done that, they realize that the editor will send it back with a note saying that these 3 chapters can go away. You're still running around. I mean, where the running around a tree could have been done in like 1 or 2 circles at best. You have run around the tree for 15 circles. There's no point. Remember, next, of course, is that is what the filler and the clutter trap is. The next is, of course, clarity, and more clarity. What you want to say, flesh it down on paper once, twice, and then put it and see what the sentence sounds. Long and convoluted sentences sometimes lead to more confusion. And that is another thing which I always like to point out. That you have a story, this is more pertaining again to fiction, but it can be used in non-fiction also. that you have a thought, your understanding of the subject or whatever you have in your head is not the same as what is there in the readers. Like if you know that you are developing a plot for a story and you know that A has met B and B has met C and and A has heard about C through B, you have to put it down in writing. You cannot leave the reader to imagine that they might have met and this person might have told, "Arey हाँ ऐसा हो सकता था." There is no room for that. Everything has to be put in writing, and you have to, in the middle, you have to complete the development of the idea. Next, please. Yeah. And then you come to the last of it, of course, leaving in style, I've called. That is why endings are important. And you have to know when to stop. When you have decided to stop, be very brief, leave something for the reader to think about. And do not leave any idea or any thought just hanging. That, like, let's say, supposing you have like addressed something like, again, since I'm quoting repeatedly the example of the ear, if you have spoken something about like how deafness can be caused by an infection of the ear, you have to tie that up neatly also, that this can be treated and this is the treatment for it. Do not leave it hanging, just put in one line about infection and then go on and on and on about noise pollution. No, this is not done. So you have to tie up all the loose ends before you come to the ending, and you have to keep your endings clean and sharp. At the same time, give something to the reader to think about. Because I remember I had once written a piece about the gin and tonic, which is a popular cocktail, and I had researched just for fun. I researched a little bit about its history, and ultimately I managed to come across a quote which was, I think, by Winston Churchill or someone, which I decided to use in my ending. So the next time, if you're the ending went something like this, that quote: next time if you're accused of overindulgence, you have the perfect repository to it to say the gin and tonic is not a drink, it's a drug. So it leaves the reader thinking that, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm not trying to encourage anyone here, but just to say, it leaves the reader thinking about what it was actually invented for and what it has started doing, what it is being used for now. So that is what it is. So leave the readers satisfied and somewhat enriched. I won't say, to say enriched actually would be a step too far, so to speak. But you have to give the reader something different to think about. That is what it is. Next, please. Now, what are the general points when you are doing your writing? You have to pay attention to detail. This is again more important, especially if anyone is developing a short story or something. If you are able to come up with a perfectly, or even when we come to the non-fiction part, when we come to a travelogue part of it, if we are able to bring in the details of even why is a sunset in Mumbai different from a sunset in Goa, let's say. The same sea, it's the seashore, it is just the same sun is setting. But you have to pay attention to detail and give a proper description which will keep the reader, which will again appeal to the reader's imagination. Another thing is, of course, write grammatically. The least that you can do is when you are coming up, I mean, that is the basic, the bare bones. If you think that you want to write, there are two things you can write in any language, whichever language you are most comfortable with. But these are the general rules which are applicable all across the spectrum. That is, you have to write grammatically, and because that is what, if you are a writer who doesn't write grammatically, then it is very difficult to be getting on with. Nowadays, of course, we have the advantage of something called Grammarly. We have an inbuilt Google editor, and of course, we have spell check also. So sometimes, even if the computer is going to miss something, it's better that you do it manually, spell check 100 times, and write the best that you can in your first attempt itself. Of course, there are things which will need to be done and redone and done and redone. That is what editing is for. But the development of your idea and the way you put it across, the way you want it put across, has to come out the best in your person. And of course, I have mentioned something which is called as the Hemingway app here. The Hemingway app is something which actually grades your writing, depending and according to school grading. So grade 1 is the youngest, and they go on all the way up to grade 12. And they have said that if you are generally catering to a general audience, if it is of course a very niche audience in a very specific field, all specialists, then it need not stop at grade 12, it can be PhD also, that is beside the point. But if you're addressing a general audience, what I would like to say is the use of Hemingway app. They have said that anyone who uses Hemingway app, if they are able to get a grading between 7 and 8, that means something which the reader, with something which a child in 7th or 8th grade will understand. That is the ideal way to write if you're writing on any topic for a general audience. Yeah. Next, please. Now we come to some specific things. Specific forms of writing, so to speak. All these are non-fiction. All these fall under the purview of articles, you can say. The first one, which like since Dr. Mansi mentioned at the outset that the TCU has got a lot of different sections. So I've picked up a few sections of those, not all. Science and technology. Again, clarity, and more clarity. And this is very important, especially when you are writing as an expert, but you are writing to someone who's not an expert. Like I told you, you have to bring yourself to the level of the reader without seeming condescending. So know your reader before you decide on what type of language you're going to use, and try to bring in a personal touch. Now you might think that science and the humanities or the art of creative writing are two things at two ends of a spectrum. So how are you going to reconcile them? No, they can be reconciled, because all that, like at the outset I mentioned that what you need to be a good writer is clarity and a logical flow of thoughts. And I think no one is better qualified for this than people who are actually indulging in science and technology, because that is their, so to speak, core competence. So that is why clarity may be easy. Try to bring in a personal touch. Here again, I had read a very nice article on how bats, I mean, it was something very simple, on how bats use echolocation to detect danger, to detect obstacles, and to find their prey, of course, because we all know the saying, as blind as a bat. So they are all dependent on their hearing. That is what it is. And that is what the writer had started off with. She was actually a very respected doctorate in zoology, and she had a lot of technical papers on the lives of bats under her belt, which had, I think, been published in the journal Nature and all that, all kinds of things she had done. But how she was trying to address it to a lay audience like me was when she said that bats go through their life yelling at it, and they decide their course of action on how it yells back at you. Now that was something which you could immediately relate to. What do you mean that they're yelling? Because you can never hear, they are all quiet and flying around. But that is how she started off her introduction to echolocation. Like when you are like throwing out a sound, how it reflects back. And I thought that was a very nice touch as to bring in a modicum of interest and to put it across in simple yet understandable language for lay people. The next, of course, is travelogues. Again, here travelogue, if you are writing like in general, there are people who write travel brochures for different travel companies. That's a different story. But you're not trying to do that. When you are writing a travelogue, you are trying to emphasize your own experience. And try to keep it again in logical this. I mean, if you are going, let us say, to, Mauritius or something. If you're going to Mauritius, if you want to say that, I was very relieved that I did not have to do the running around for a visa, because Mauritius offers visa on arrival for Indians. There, you have done that. So you have finished that, so to speak. But at the same time, if you say that I landing at Mauritius airport was an experience in itself, because I could see the blue sea in the distance. And then, okay, so now the reader is thinking about the blue sea. But after that, if you bring him back and say that make sure you keep your passport with you, because it will be required by the passport or by the immigration official to stamp a visa in, you are going into the travel brochures in. Suddenly from the sea, you are moving into something like whether visa is required or not required. Okay. Another thing which can be very cliched in travelogues is using adjectives, too many adjectives. Because like words like, a famous writer has once said that I have still to find a village which is not nestled in the foothills. All villages are nestled. None of them are clinging precariously to the mountainside. All of them are nestled. All green is verdant. All skies and seas are azure. Try to find out some other adjective or try to personalize, even if you do not use any adjective. That when I could feel my heart expanding when I looked at the vast expanse of the clean sea. Here the adjective used is clean, very small, very simple kind of adjective. But you know what the author is trying to convey, that the sea there in whatever place, since we are talking of Mauritius, the sea there is very clean as compared to wherever the author's hometown. So that is what it is. So these are the points of importance for traveler. Next, please. And the last one which I have touched upon here is the interview. Because I think, the interviews are make for very interesting reading, because this is like a personal communication at its best, so to speak. Most of the times, people whom you may like to talk to, but you will not have a direct access, you find it fun to read about. Again, the little voyeurism gene peeking. So whenever you're going to take an interview, here I'm touching on the people who are trying to take interviews, who are the interviewers, so to speak. Always do the basic homework on the interview that goes without saying. You may have your list of questions, but get a brief idea into the background of what the interviewee is interested in. You can take like the um, you say you might be taking the interview of a very famous surgeon, and you will who may have innovated some technique for surgery or something. You might want to know all about that so that you can put it across to your readers. But then at the same time, if you give a very brief background that why did this person actually go into surgery, your interview, which would have garnered like let's say 50 views, will suddenly go and garner 500, because that is where the story comes in. And again, they say, if you find interesting people to take interviews of, that's another very interesting thing which I had read about the one of the more famous libraries in New York. The author was supposed to write a piece on the library itself, but what he did instead was he found out all the librarians and took a small, not exactly an interview, but he gathered all their points of view. And it made for absolutely phenomenal reading, because those people were spending their lives there. That is how it is. So do some basic homework about the interviewee. And of course, that is, it goes without saying again, you will have mostly pre-decided what questions to ask, and get the interviewee's point of view precisely. So many times you find that you are veering slightly towards what you want the interviewee to say. That it doesn't work like that. What he says, he says. And another, try to stick to specifics, of course. And another thing during interviews, most of the times, here it is a natural human tendency, of course. Most of the times we are like, we wouldn't like to interrupt. Of course, nowadays you have the development of the dictaphone and all that. You can just take a phone interview. You have something like a podcast where the person is actually talking. And that's a different story. But if some point is not clear, something which you have to later on put in writing, if something is not clear, you have to ask again. You have to say, I'm sorry, I might have to interrupt you for a minute, but please could you come back to that point? What makes you think like this, or what were you saying? Don't think that you can write at speed or you can record at speed, and then afterwards something is missed out, and then you will have to worry about what's going, because it will not go in the logical. So these are the three things which I have like tried to briefly touch upon in nonfiction. That is how to write the science and technology article. Another thing is your travelogue and interview. And another thing is what I would like to adjust as an extension of the interview is something which we have the opinion, which Dr. Mansi opined. Because that is if an interview is a dialogue, you can say that the opinion piece is more of a monologue. It is like it's a soliloquy, what a person is saying. So again, here you require clarity of thought, giving your opinion, and most important of all, sticking to it no matter what it sounds. That is what it is. That's why that's another prerequisite actually, especially if you are into giving opinion pieces or whatever. That is another prerequisite of a writer, that having an opinion, but the ability to stick to that opinion. Next, please. Now you come to the most important part of actually getting anything out for someone to read, and that is editing. I'm sorry I had to put in this quote, which given the situation doesn't sound very good, but there you are. Revising a story down to the bare essentials is always a little like murdering little children, but it must be done. This was said by Stephen King, who's like a very famous writer as well. Now, one thing is, you have very grandiose ideas which are like kind of floating around. You have written 10 different sentences, you have stuck to the grammar, you've kept your voice intact and everything. But afterwards, when you come to the end of the piece and you start reading, you yourself again feel that, this shouldn't be here, that shouldn't be there. You can consider as like if writing has been beveled down to the level of carpentry, editing is the polishing. No one would really like to sit on an unfinished chair with all kinds of little sharp spikes sitting and poking you in unnecessary places, to be very honest. So that is why you have to be ruthless while editing your own. Nowadays, of course, you have 3 different levels of editing, which is a different story. That is, you have people who call themselves developmental editors. That is, they actually help to come up with the idea and give a basic structure to whatever you're trying to write. That is one. And then, of course, you have line editing with your completed work. And then afterwards, you have your proofreading in which you're trying to catch the last of any mistakes which you made. And this is one thing which has always stuck with me for some reason, that you try to pare your work down to 2/3 of its initial length. Because that is when you're actually sitting down and doing the editing, you find that so many sentences are repetitions of each other. It's unfortunate, but it is true, because we sometimes, that is what happens to most writers most of the times is they are unable to see the forest for the trees. They tend to get like a kind of telescopic vision, especially if you're trying to cover many aspects in one article. And most of us try to do, like, we have a topic, then we look at the pros, we look at the cons, we go to the conclusion. That is how normally it is supposed to flow. But then what happens? Sometimes we are so caught up in something like the pros that we forget to, we put in too many things repeating the same thing, and then we say that, yeah, this shouldn't have happened. At the con, just one sentence. So that is why, that is what it is. So try to pare down your work, be ruthless while you're editing. I mean, even if you have to toss out the whole piece and rewrite it, that is fine. No issue. But you have to do it very, very, very ruthless. If you don't want your editor to be ruthless with your work, that is another. And try to pare your work down to 2/3 of its initial length. Like, again, to quote Williamson, sir, he has said that if I tell you to give me a 4-page article, and if I tell you to cut it down to 3 pages, you will grumble and grouse, and yes, but you will do it. When you bring me the 3 pages, and then when I tell you that you have to bring me only the 1 page, that is when we see your real editing skills. And to see a very good example of these kind of editing skills, there is one writer called Kritika Pandey. She has won the Commonwealth Prize for short stories, and she has written a story called The Great Indian Tea and Snacks. And here tea is TEE as in t-shirt. The Great Indian Tea and Snacks, and Snakes, not snacks, sorry, The Great Indian Tea and Snakes. So try to read that story and you will see that it is absolutely tight editing, in the sense that you don't get 1 minute to think from where develop your imagination as to where the story is going next. It is absolutely in your face. If you ever, I think it is available on the Commonwealth website. So you can just go into the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. You can type it into Google and I'm sure you'll come up with. I think she has won it in the year 2019 or 20. I'm not sure. One of those two. But do read it, because it makes for very interesting, it gives you a very good idea as to what good editing can do for us. And if you want me to quote from visual media, I would like to quote the film Three Idiots. That's another thing. The whole, personally, it's my opinion, even though I'm not qualified to talk about it, but personally, I think the film was such a success only because of its taut dialogue and editing. There's no time to think that this is a very long film. It just goes on and on and on. Next, please. Yeah. Then you come to the next. Editing for editors. If you just happen to be like an editor, which, here that is Sam. I'm looking at you, Dr. Mansi and Dr. Nikita, if you're here, because editing for editors is another. that you have to develop a relation of negotiation and trust with the writer, so that any writer, not just, I mean, not here, not just in a magazine, so to speak, but anyone who's working on editing anywhere out there, that the writer has to be confident that this person is going to keep my voice intact, because the writer, it is the writer's thoughts, it is the writer's ideas, right? The writer can do whatever they want in their editing. It is their piece. Remember, if you didn't write it in the first place, you cannot rewrite it. You come up with so many different ideas, yeah, because that is what you bring to the piece actually. That is the objectivity which the author sometimes loses. You're always free to make annotations, always free to give suggestions. And you might say that if you put in like one or two ideas and say that I want these better developed, the writer will thank you for it. That is not this. But if you like, because so many people have these grouses, that the next time when I saw, that is what one person has actually quoted, that the next time when I saw my article, it was unrecognizable. I didn't recognize it as something which I had written. That is what the editor had done. So do not be, I mean, I would say that, to put it a little bit strongly, I would say that this is like literally kidnapping at its worst, so to speak. That someone else has an idea, is trying to develop it. You come in out of left field and you do something with it. That is what it is. So, and of course, another thing is, do the line editing. You have people to do it, of course, and nowadays you have Hemingway and Grammarly and Spellcheck, but do the line editing carefully. Look at structure, sentence, and form. And remember, again, if you didn't write it in the first place, you cannot rewrite. And that brings us to the conclusion of this rather long talk, I should say. Writing well means believing in your writing and believing in yourself. You write only as well as you make yourself write. So remember, at the end of the day, only thing that I would like anyone who's listened to this to take away from it is, just remember that yes, once you have the creativity in you and you've decided to start writing, keep at it, and sooner or later you will get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sumedha ma'am, for such a wonderful and informative session. Before we move on to the vote of thanks, would anyone from the audience like to give us a short feedback or maybe have any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure, sir.
Yes, madam. Can you give us some ideas about some courses on creative writing which you recommend?
I would recommend the course by Symbiosis, sir. They have 2 courses and these are again online courses. So, they send you the material and everything. That is not an issue at all. One is Diploma in Creative Writing. There they give you the bare bones of what is necessary. And the second one is the Advanced Diploma in Creative Writing, the course which I did, which lasts for 1 year and consists of 2 semesters. They send you extensive material, and at the same time they have a proper what you can say, the exam format which they have. They send you like any topics out of the blue and you're supposed to write like the necessary words, the specific worded piece, and send it back to them. And then at the end of it, I mean, you're properly examined. So that is one thing which I would recommend. Another thing is, there is this place called the Himalayan Writing Institute retreat, which is situated in Uttarakhand, in a village called Satpol, which is in Nainital district. It's run by a wonderful person called Chetan Mahajan, who actually was, I think, in charge of education for HCL Technologies Limited. He is a 2-time published writer. He writes several pieces for Hindustan Times. And if you can just check out the site, that is the Himalayan Writing Retreat, if you check it out, you get an extensive idea about all the courses that he conducts. He has got a lot of what you can say, contacts across the writer spectrum. He has specific courses if you require it to tailor it to your needs, so to speak. Something on short stories, something on general creative writing, something on script writing, something on publishing, translation, what have you. You only just have to keep yourself updated with the site. You can just once you get into a site and you kind of email or something, they have a contact number and an email. Once you just put in an inquiry there, you will get all the necessary stuff.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And wonderful talk as usual. Great. Very
Thank you, sir.
informative and a lot of clarity.
I hope that's what I was trying to achieve. So, thank you very much.
Okay, I think we can move on to the vote of thanks. Rita, over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. Good afternoon, one and all present here. I thank you all for joining us today for this exciting webinar. It has been an enriching experience, and we are grateful to have your active participation. Our heartfelt appreciation goes to our distinguished speaker, Ms. Dr. Sumedha Rege, who share her expertise and valuable insights. Your knowledge has been truly inspiring and will undoubtedly leave a lasting impact. We also extend our gratitude to all the attendees who took time to be with us today. Your engagement and thoughtful questions added immense value to the discussion. Lastly, we express our sincere thanks to the organizing team and the technical crew for their dedicated effort and making this event a successful one. As we conclude, we hope you leave a newfound knowledge and idea to apply in your respective field. Let's stay connected and continue to learn and grow. Thank you one and all again, and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.